Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is the Book Trek 2023 Star Trek The Next Generation tag. So this tag was created by Steve Donahue, one of my co-hosts, one of my bridge crew members for Book Trek 2023. This has become really an annual event where during the summer, we basically read Star Trek fiction and we geek out about one of our favorite fictional universes. Each year has been a little bit different. I think going forward, we're probably going to stick to what we did this year and just read Trek fiction. That's all. This year, it was the summer of Trek, so it was 3 months, June, July, and August. August is coming to a close, but before it does, I want to get to these tag questions. Steve has been kind enough and creative enough to create some tag questions of the nosy kind, which are the kinds that he likes, and they are all prompted by some of the main members of the crew of these various Star Trek shows. So he already did an original series one, which is his favorite, and he actually, I think, did that more like his top 10 episodes, and he somehow created a tag around that. And again, they're not really bookish questions, they're more general questions, again, of the nosy kind. And this one revolves more around the crew of the Enterprise D, which happens to be my favorite. So let's just dive into this. The first question, or prompt, he says, The Next Generation premiered in 1987, and for 7 years regularly racked up higher ratings than any other Star Trek franchise. What has been your relationship with the show? Well, growing up, I did catch a lot of original series episodes on television, and I knew I liked it. And I was also catching the Next Generation shows here and there. And I don't know what it was, but I guess I saw an episode as a teenager that really kind of hooked me, and I don't know which one it was. But it was enough to where I became very curious about the show, because I didn't really watch it when it was going through its regular syndication. It ended in the early 90s, so we're talking like mid-90s. It would have been like a few years after the show actually ended that I started actually really paying attention to it. Again, I was in high school at that point, in the late 90s. And I got a job, I guess, and I had used my money to start buying the DVD sets of the seasons. So I got the first season, and I remember I didn't have a DVD player on my TV in my room, but I had a computer that would play DVDs. So I sat there in front of my computer in my room and just would watch Star Trek, and I really got entranced by it. It felt, the Enterprise D just really kind of felt like a second home. I would watch like 3 episodes before going to bed, and sometimes I'd even dream about being on the ship. And it really became special for me. I didn't finish all the seasons by then. I remember this is before streaming, and those DVD sets were kind of pricey. They're actually pretty expensive. So I got a couple of seasons, the first couple of seasons. And then, excuse me, when I was in college, started dating the woman who would eventually become my wife. Then when we moved in together, it kind of became a nightly ritual for us to go through the Next Generation episodes. And we would go through maybe 2 a night. And she fell in love with the series as well. And it just kind of became this part of our courting ritual in a lot of ways. And I remember when the show ended, she cried because she's like, oh, there's never going to be any more Star Trek. She didn't realize that there was a lot more Star Trek to come. So after we watched Next Gen, we watched the movies, and actually maybe we watched original series, then we watched all the movies, and but anyhow, we eventually got through all of them. We're still going through the new ones right now, the ones that have been coming out for the last few years. So yeah, it is something that kind of holds a special place for me, for my wife, for our relationship. We've got little Star Trek things around the house, Picard things. So I describe Star Trek as kind of like between Star Trek and horror, that's like my yin and yang. I don't remember which one is which, yin and yang. I don't know which one is light and dark, but you can designate them accordingly, depending on whatever it is. But yeah, it's a show that I happen to really love, and it's still my favorite version of Star Trek. Not that I don't like the other versions, but it's mine. It's one that I always go back to the most. Number 2, the Enterprise D. Picard's Enterprise continues the epic adventures of James Kirk's Enterprise. Did you read Next Generation books as they were coming out? Have you read many of them since? can't speak today. I did not read them as they were coming out. No. What got me into them, actually, it was after I'd already gotten into this series. I had a friend who was reading a lot of Star Wars novels, and he was a big Star Wars fan. I've just never been that into Star Wars. I like the first 3 movies, but after that, I can kind of care less for it. But he was talking about how much he was enjoying them, and by that point, I'd already been going to a lot of library book sales, and I remember seeing a lot of Star Trek novels sitting around at those book sales, and listening to him, speak so fondly of reading these books that take place inside this, licensed universe, made me think, well, maybe I'll give Star Trek a chance. Why not? So I think I picked up a paperback for 50 cents. I might remember it. I think the first one I read was Fortune's Light. That might be what it's called. It's a Riker novel. And I just really enjoyed it. I recognized it wasn't fantastic literature or anything like that, but I'm like, man, this was a good time. And from then on, I really started reading Star Trek in the summer. It became something that I started packing in a suitcase. I had also packed a lot beforehand when I was doing a lot of international traveling. I was packing a lot of Sagan books and nonfiction. But as we started especially when I had kids and I couldn't focus nearly as long on a book because I've got to take care of kids also while I'm traveling, I just started packing Star Trek novels in. And Star Trek fiction, especially Next Generation, but not just, I've expanded since then, especially Next Generation fiction, just kind of became my summer read. And that's how I kind of fell into it. And that's also the origin of Book Trek in a lot of ways. I was talking, after I joined BookTube, and I was talking with Steve Donahue. I don't remember how exactly the subject of Star Trek books came up, but we both recognized that we liked them, and I had mentioned that they're kind of my summer read, and somehow as we were talking, an idea of Book Trek started forming. So that's how all that came about. But yeah, Star Trek books have always been my summer beach read. I know a lot of other people read, maybe a bestseller or mystery or romance, whatever it is, but Star Trek books for me. That's my ideal beach read. Number 3, the crew. The stellar bridge crew of the Enterprise D is far less human than that of the classic Enterprise. Do you deviate from the textbook human norm? In what ways are you some sort of circus sideshow freak? And I think what Steve is actually asking is not necessarily personality. I think he wants to know is, do you have implants? Do you have a fake hip? Or anything like that? No, aside from dental work from when I was young, some fillings, haven't had a cavity in a long time, knock on wood now. But aside from that, no, I am entirely human, boringly so. Number 4, Captain Jean-Luc Picard is a starship captain, but could easily have followed a different path and been a professor, an archeologist, etc. Do you have an idea of what your dream job would be? Now, he had said when he created this tag, that he wasn't thinking of the more childish answer of just being rich, but that is still my real answer. I would just like to be independently wealthy. That's what I would like to do, childish or not. That's that's a dream job for me. But if we're talking more realistically, there are a couple. I'm thinking something I was very close to maybe following the path more of a academic historian. Things weren't really working out as far as me being able to pursue certain things at that time, but that was one possibility. So, more of an academic career, certainly. Writer. I used to write a lot more than I do now, but it's something I do want to get back into again. And the other kind of thing that I think it would be hard, but I'm fascinated by it, and that'd be a digital nomad, kind of a travel writer, creating whatever it is, blog posts, or I'm not much of a vlog person, but I guess I could figure out how to do it. But basically travel and create content. I think that would be a lot of fun. Number 5, Will Riker in his off hours is unapologetically hedonistic. How much of a pleasure seeker are you? Have you ever done anything in Vegas that very much needed to stay in Vegas? Riker's a character that I like, and it's kind of funny because my wife for some reason doesn't like him. I think it's the more smirking womanizing that she doesn't always get along with, but I think he's fun in that way. But it was actually kind of funny because just this past summer, we went to Terrificon, which is a very big comic convention in Connecticut. And it was over at the Mohegan Sun Casino. And the special guests were from Star Trek. You had Jonathan Frakes there, who played Riker. Jeffrey Combs, I got to meet. There was Rebecca Romaine. There was Terry Farrell. So they had different Star Trek people there as their headliners. So we got to meet Jonathan Frakes. And, you know, the line wasn't very long. And I got to say, I have to give the guy credit. He didn't rush anybody, and he was charming as heck. My wife begrudgingly basically walked away saying, okay, he was pretty awesome. Of course, we were there with my kids. My daughter was dressed as Spider-Man. And the first thing he did is he looked my daughter in the eyes and said, "Hey, Spidey." And he shook her hand. And then he pointed at me, pointed at my chin, and said, "Good beard." And I cannot ever let my wife live that down. She's always, you know, she lets me grow it out. But then after a certain point, she'll be like, "Aren't you going to trim that up a little bit?" And I'm always be like, "You mean like Riker?" And just to kind of, you know, dig at her a little bit because I know of her distaste for the character. The fact that Riker, certain charming Jonathan Frakes, first thing he said to me was "good beard." She can't live that down. And of course, she couldn't stay mad because almost immediately he recognized that her necklace pendant was actually a communicator, Star Trek communicator, and he saw that. So he figured out a way, basically. I said afterwards, I told my wife, I think he's an incubus. He could somehow kind of like see into everybody's soul and seduce them. But we had a great time. He was absolutely charming, and I think that it made her like Riker a lot more, as begrudging as it would be for her to admit it. I think it did. But the question, of course, here being, am I hedonistic? You know, and I would say I'm not very debauched in many ways. I appreciate physical pleasure, certainly, but like all things, in moderation. I'm not too outside the norm when it comes to what sorts of things I enjoy. All that being said, I think I'd be very much at home at Ryza. I think I would have a good time there. 6, Deanna Troy isn't a full telepath. How empathetic are you? I'd say I'm a very sympathetic person. I'm not always empathetic. I recognize people's emotions, but I don't easily share them. Again, that's, I think, something that might frustrate my wife sometimes because she's highly empathetic. But I can recognize people's emotions very quickly, but it takes a lot for me to get there myself. I'm, I guess, a little more Vulcan in that way. So I don't share or take on other people's feelings very well, but I recognize what they are. 7, Dr. Crusher is the first Enterprise officer to serve with her own child. Have you ever worked with one of your children? Or could you, considering what pathetic losers they are? My kids are still pretty young. My son is just starting middle school this week. My daughter is 7, so no, I haven't had to work with them yet. So I guess the jury's still out on that one. 8, Data is a super sophisticated android, and yet he voluntarily keeps a cat. Do you also have this serious personal failing? We do have a cat. We have other animals in the house, including guinea pigs and a dog. The only animal that I agreed to, that I helped bring into the house, is the dog. I came home one day and there was this black kitten staring at me from a corner. So, you know, I get along with the cat mostly. I think he gets along with me more than I get along with him because he does stuff that irritates me all the time. But he knows that I'm the one that feeds him. He's always the one that wants to come and play with me, so he doesn't hold any grudges, apparently. And number 9, the Enterprise D's bridge crew, I can't speak, crew gradually develops an excellent chemistry. I cannot speak. I'm going to try this again. The Enterprise D's bridge crew gradually develops an excellent chemistry. Have you ever had that kind of chemistry in a work environment? I would say I never worked with a group of people long enough to have excellent chemistry. Uh, I worked in retail and things like that, and yeah, I've gotten along with people. I'm a teacher though, and as a teacher, even though you're surrounded by people, you've got over 100 people that you work with every day, but they're young, so you feel like you're kind of an island unto yourself. You don't talk to adults a lot as a teacher, uh, and I have people on my team, and I talk to them sometimes, but I don't get to talk to them a lot. I don't get to hang out with them a lot throughout the workday. And over the years, we've had a lot of staff turnover. So it's not very often I get to work, several years with people. So, I like my coworkers, I like my work environment, but I can't say that I've ever had long enough to really develop that kind of chemistry. And that's it. That is the Star Trek The Next Generation tag for Book Trek 2023. I want to thank Steve Donahue for creating this tag, and anybody who's participating in Book Trek, if you haven't done it already, please do it. I've seen some people doing this, and these are great questions. So thank you. As always, thank you, BookTube.